So my name is Brent Beer. I'm one of the sales engineers at GitHub. I've been at GitHub for a little while now. Before that, I was on the training team, so you may have seen my face or been in one of my webinars or seen me out publicly speaking at another conference or doing another workshop. If so, I hope you review those talks as well as you review your code, and review this one as well as you'll review your code as well. So I've been in San Francisco for a little while, so I didn't have to, a little bit of an echo. I didn't have to travel far to actually get here today, luckily. So I want to jump right into this right away to talk about what we're gonna, or look at what we're gonna talk about and see what our goal is here. Of course, in the title it says pull request, code review, and the GitHub Flow. And we're gonna talk about that, but a little more than just rattling off some definitions or me telling you you should adhere to this process, or me giving you something to say, go back to your office and immediately make this work. That's not always the case, and there's some tips we'll see throughout this and some approaches we'll see that hopefully you can take back to your office and work with once you get there. If you do see some things up here that are familiar to you, maybe you already know how pull requests work, that's great. Hopefully there's additional things I say, or there's some additional notes you may have to ask me at the end during any Q&A time, where we can kind of discuss anything that you'd like and or like to discuss about, any different approaches, or how you can take some of these back to your company, and we can talk about how to kind of grow and change certain culture you may have within your company as well. So let's jump right into it. So this is one version, I guess, of a traditional software process. People work on some change, they have some sprint planning, they have a ticket get assigned to someone, they do some development, they make some changes, they have some kind of continuous integration work, testing, great, I'm glad to see that. But then code review is this completely separate thing off to the side, because it can't work with their current workflow. They don't use pull requests, maybe because they're using some other version control tool besides GitHub. They're on SVN, and they don't even do branching that well. Or, I don't know, most developers that I talk to are, more than I'd like to admit, run into problems like this. They don't get good feedback on their code right away, and they often struggle to improve their own quality of code. So this feels pretty rigid to me, and it doesn't have to work that way, and I want to help show that we can all do better, and we can do better for this. And maybe this just isn't, maybe what we have up here is a version of what you'd like to have. I certainly think this is a little bit better. You have maybe an issue, a bug, a feature, some kind of backlog, depending on your process. Again, it gets assigned to a person, but after it gets assigned to a person, we see that first commit come in, and once we have that difference of code, we have people able to start opening a pull request, collaborating on their changes, talking back and forth. Hey, I tried this approach. Lauren, do you know of another approach I can work on? Oh, maybe we should talk to Tim. Maybe he's got ideas because he's done this before. And you have this cycle of continuous collaboration and then continuous deployment to go test how that code actually looks. Maybe you deploy that out to a staging server using Heroku and their deployment pipelines. And once that code gets merged in, once it gets accepted or that issue gets closed out, maybe you then merge it into master, whatever your default branch may be. We'll take a look at default branches with protected branches here in a little bit. And maybe you also then do another deployment, depending on which process you actually have. You kind of have the choice to do that here. And this is actually a generalization of how GitHub itself works. The core team at GitHub, we work on changes, we have a branch that we work on them, we get feedback from our coworkers, and we deploy that branch out to production. We see how it is, how it looks. We actually monitor Twitter a little bit. We have our own internal monitoring. It turns out a lot of people using GitHub will let us know on Twitter if things are bad or slow or down for them. So that's kind of a good barrier for us to actually look at, or at least one of them. So with this workflow, we have, I don't know, has anyone seen guides.github.com? Just a few people. I see a few tempted to raise your hands a little bit more. What about githubengineering.com? Maybe one that people seem a little bit more proud to raise their hand about. So let's take a little bit peek at both of those. I love guides. I worked with a lot of the early people who put together our guides. And the one I like in particular is that GitHub Flow guide. We put that in the Hello World guide kind of at the very top so that people would see, okay, this is a general workflow that I can start applying to my company. And here's a Hello World guide to get me started to actually work with some of these changes. So of course I'm going to be talking about this flow, the GitHub Flow and general workflows a little bit today. But the key here is to keep it lightweight. Again, I'll get more audience participation. How many people have tried the Git flow? All right, hands that are still up. How many people liked it? Okay, a few people. I personally, I got a handout at an audience, or as an audience member at a conference for the Git flow. And when I first started using it at a company many, many years ago, I had no idea where to start with it. Is it up? Is it down? Do I turn it on its side and see all these different branches? I don't really understand how, I didn't understand how to actually use that to be effective when I was first starting software development. But luckily with the GitHub Flow, one thing that we really like is how lightweight it is. We don't force any one workflow with this, but this is our suggested flow with this. So, sorry. This is what we'll be working towards when we talk about pull request and when we talk about code review and we talk about collaboration practices. We'll be working towards this. And then, as I mentioned, the GitHub engineering blog. This is one of the posts up there that I particularly love. It's Aman had wrote, I don't know, it says back at June 2nd, he wrote this blog post talking about how we actually deploy our code. And he walked through the whole process, talking about it. And when he talked about this, he actually sent a pull request back to our guides page to add in this little extra step of deployment, because we work a little bit differently than just a basic GitHub flow. We deploy our code on our feature branch out to production. So I'm starting to drop a little bit more and more terms. Pull requests, branches, commits, deploys. We won't talk too much about deploys. But let's start at the key thing of collaboration. And the thing that I think changes everyone's lives when they get to github.com. When they first see their first project that, oh, well, this is a really complicated project. It's developed by Facebook, it's using Java, or it's using Go, and I don't understand any of those languages, but I do understand this documentation piece, and that part's wrong, and I'd like to collaborate on just that piece. So right away, one of the first early things we can do to send a pull request is to find the common piece within their code that we can edit. For me, a lot of times that ends up just being a simple documentation change. I keep telling myself one of these days I'm going to send a pull request, or well, not a pull request, but submit a patch to core Git to fix some of their man pages, because if I look through some of the commands, I get confused myself. Maybe that would be my contribution for this month. So pull requests themselves. Work on some change, propose that change back, and have a conversation about it. Sometimes people tell me, why would I use GitHub? I can just merge changes locally, and I can just push directly to master. If you do that, there's no collaboration in that. And you don't want to work in a silo. You're not going to be enriching your own software development learning if you're working by yourself without anyone else. You're not getting any feedback from anyone. You can't learn from their experiences if you haven't talked to them. And that talking and that collaboration piece is one of the most important pieces I want all of you to remember by the end of this talk. So if I forget it, or if I go over 5 minutes without mentioning collaboration, just raise your hand or yell out the word collaboration to me, and we can, I'll just yell about it again. So again, I mentioned if you don't know Git or GitHub, and I'm sure some of you do, inevitably we're at a GitHub conference, but maybe you're not a software developer. Chris mentioned earlier we have 11 million developers on GitHub, and traditionally there were studies that said there's only 20 million in the world, but there's so many people nowadays who are contributing to projects on GitHub. They're writing in Markdown, they're finding a misspelling in some documentation. I would count them as developers. If you're just working on it as a hobby, if you've went to a Rails Girls or a Rails Bridge or Girl Develop It or any of those great community organizations out there helping people learn to code, you're a developer. So what is a pull request? Pull requests start with a branch. A branch itself is when you have your main set of code, so in this case we're going to call that master, and you decide you find a bug or find something you'd like to change, you work on a different branch. We'll call that a feature branch. And so when you branch off of master and you try something new, I often relate that to a sandbox environment. You have the full history of all the code, all the text changes, all the files, but I want to work over here, not affect what's on master, because often people will relate what's on master to being deployed in production. I don't want to mess with that. And I want to try something new out, and I want to practice it. So that's where branches actually come into. And so once you have some changes on that branch from when you created your branch, you can propose those changes back using a pull request. So you have your branch, you've made some changes, and you push that change up to GitHub. And GitHub will actually make it a lot easier for you now once you have that branch with some different changes on it. It'll pop open a little green button for you that says compare and pull request, and you can just get started right from there once you've created those changes. One barrier people, I said in my abstract, I talked about some barriers people have to pull requests, so here's one of the first ones. They don't understand how to use them. That seems like a pretty big barrier to entry. If there's some tool I'm told to use and I don't understand how it works, I'm not going to use it because I don't feel safe using it. But with GitHub, if you start using these branches and you send pull requests and you just talk to your coworkers, your friends, your prospective teammates, and collaborate with them, there's collaboration again, you can actually get started on this. So instead of live demoing any of my talk here today, I have a series of videos. So if I go over something in this video and you want me to repeat it again, just raise your hand and yell at me to repeat that. What we're looking at. Test, check one, two, there we go. Hey, welcome back. So what we're going to talk about in this short little 30-second to a minute clip, I forget how long this particular one is, I'm just going to demonstrate this quick pull request flow. I have a markdown document here called Markdown Practice, creatively enough. And in this actual project, I just want to add to the README, add a little bit of markdown that actually says how to do this. And I want to put this out there just so we can get everyone to a baseline of what it looks like to edit some code and send a pull request. And one thing that often shocks people when I go through and I edit this line of code and I just add this little bit of markdown is that I'm actually going to be sending this pull request to myself. Some people often, when they're first exposed to GitHub and pull request, is they send their pull request from some other open source project that they didn't have access to over to theirs. So I'm just sending this to myself. I'll just wait for this to finish up. There's some pieces in here I've sped up just for the purposes of me not sitting up here awkwardly silent. In this, actually sending myself a pull request on my own project is something that often looks strange to people. Well, what's the point of sending myself a pull request if I'm not working with anyone else? Well, besides just practicing using the tool and practicing for when I do work with other people, I don't know that this project will always remain just something I work on. What if later I decide that I want to practice using Git and GitHub with colleagues at work? I'm going to do a quick lunch and learn session, and I want to show this project and invite them to work on it and use pull requests with me. Well, they can go see an example of how I sent myself a pull request and some collaboration that I actually did even with myself. I always send a pull request with a concise title. The title itself, I often relate to an email. In an email subject line, I want to be able to see what that subject line is and know what's going to come when I open that up. And then I always comment as well, or I try to as much as I can. If you ever find me opening a pull request somewhere on GitHub and I don't have a message in that first opening post, feel free to comment on there and tell me otherwise, or that I should go back and edit it. And now this pull request lives up there forever. So this isn't some email chain or some conversation that happened before a new developer started. Someone new came in, saw this piece of code change, and said, what was the motivation behind this? How did we do this? Why did we do this change? You have a URL that you can specifically take and send it to them. Say, here's the conversation that we had. Here's why we made that change. And if they want to question that change further, they should comment on that pull request. We've often said a URL is forever. And Ben Balter, who I believe is speaking tomorrow or later today, talking about GitHub Pages, he'll say in some of his talks, if you like it, put a URL on it instead of putting a ring on it. So I kind of believe that if you want to remember something, put it in an issue, put it in a pull request, and you can always get back to it later. So that's one way you use pull requests, but how do you use them well? A lot of people here already know how to use pull requests, so I'm pulling you through this, and I'm getting everyone to a baseline so that we can talk about how to use them well. There's actually a research paper that I found and friends pointed out to me, talking about some pieces of a pull request that actually allow it to be merged faster and more often, especially when submitting it to other people. So, of course, the emphasis here is mine. But the two things I want to look at here, the shorter it is, the shorter the changes are, the faster it'll be reviewed. And I think we can all agree with that, right? If someone submitted something to me and said, hey, I have this 1,000-page document I need you to review by tomorrow. I need you to find every little change that happened. Would you honestly look through all 1,000 pages of that? Imagine any lawmaker out there who's going back and forth with some edits to some law that they're voting on. You're telling me that they are actually going through all pages, making sure that no one snuck in any edits that they didn't understand? I'm sure they do, and I'm sure they have a lot of aides, but man, how much easier would it be if they just had a diff on GitHub in a pull request to actually view? That's my dream. That's what I would like. And then the second piece of that is going to be that CI piece. So, all right, little imagination experiment here, and close your eyes if this helps you. But imagine you're at your office and you're working on some code, and you saw on your Kanban board or some issue popped up in a bug tracker, and you say, I'm going to go work on this. I'm going to create a pull request. I'm going to create some commits, and I'm going to work like Brent just told me to, and like the training team at GitHub advises. So you see the feature come in, you start working on it, you are at your laptop, you're at work late, you maybe go home, you continue to work at it, and you spend all night. And then by the end of the week, or maybe after a few days, you send that as a pull request. Yes, I did it. I sent my first pull request. Or this is my 15th pull request. But you realized someone beat you to it. Maybe Rachel beat you to it because she had that one little change to start discussing. Maybe she just edited some text somewhere for the documentation change and then started building the feature. She opened that pull request right away. And that's another big barrier people have to sending pull requests. Well, I'm not quite ready with this change yet. They're going to judge me on the way this looks. And they may, but you're going to be better at it. They shouldn't judge you harshly. They should be there to help you write your code better. So Rachel starts her pull request. She brings in Lynn, and she brings in Sam, and she brings in Matt, whoever it may be. And they talk to her. They use app mentions. They're collaborating and talking to each other about, this is wrong over here. I would change this. This isn't our code style. And they actually improve the quality of code for not only that developer, Rachel in this case, or every single developer who comes in after this. Maybe Rachel ends up being a manager, and a new person comes on board and is a little nervous about sending pull requests as well. She can look back and say, here's my first pull request. I got a lot of help, and this is how we should work too. So I mentioned the other piece there being the CI pipeline, and people read pipeline. I don't know how the hell to set up a CI pipeline. What even is CI? We're not going to really worry about setting up a pipeline. At least when I think of this, I don't worry about any of that. I don't want to set up any infrastructure. But all I want is my test to run automatically. I want to start some change out, and when I push it to GitHub, I don't want to run those tests myself. I want those tests to be running and presented in the pull request, because if they're there, they're part of the story of that feature. And you'll be able to see as each of these changes come in, as there's collaboration back and forth, maybe tests fail, maybe someone suggests you make a change and now tests pass, but someone else suggested you make another change and now you see it fail again. So having CI run automatically was one of the main parts of this research paper. It said, as a software developer is accepting pull requests, you have many other factors, and they mentioned how complicated it could be. They could be an open source maintainer, but also have their day job. So they only look at those pull requests when they get home at about 5 or 6 p.m. Maybe they have a family, maybe they have extra stuff that's on top of their mind. If they don't have to run tests for your code, that's gonna help them trust your code a whole lot better. And if you're the maintainer and you don't have CI hooked up, use some CI service that'll allow you to actually run those tests right away. Now, of course, this allows us to, or we had to have kind of a testing first thought process here, and that's an important one to have, and you'll have to start implementing that as well. And earlier, Chris talked about our integrations directory. So announced this morning, we have many partners who we can just plug and play into GitHub for CI. In this paper, they talked about Travis CI, of course, one of the sponsors here as well. And that's the one that I use because I think it's really easy to set up. So this next little bit, we're going to talk about opening a pull request, and we're going to see how to just quickly add Travis to it so that it runs the tests that are already inside this application. This is just a real quick example Ruby application. It just has some simple tests to it, but I wanted to show a little bit of what that looks like. So on my repository, I start out and I just go over to my webhooks and services page. I could have gone directly to the integrations directory and added that project as well. Then once on once on Travis, I can actually just enable the CI for that particular repository. And then when I go and actually build my features, which I speed through here a little bit, adding an additional test, of course copy and pasting that in, to see that that test fails, I can actually see how the CI actually runs on this. So the important part is I'm adding a little test in there, and I open my pull request, and then we'll see the test start running on Travis's infrastructure. We'll see one fails, and then the next one fails. But let's go see the details of this. You start having people able to dive into where is this test actually failing. I don't have to actually go look at it myself, run it locally, and comment to them. I can link them to the Travis build status and see that, hey, this failed on line number 17. We actually need to include this variable, which is actually what's happening here. So add this little variable in just so that test passes, kind of test first or test-driven development there. Make that commit. And once I commit back to that branch and revisit that pull request, we'll see the CI status now kick back off again. So you have a failed test at first, and now you have a bunch of pending tests as those, that build event kicks off and goes over to Travis. And now, of course, I am actually able to merge the pull request even when those tests are running or failing, which we'll look at here in just a minute. So my test pass. Everyone looking back at this in the future, or actually if you wanted to go visit this project right now, you could actually go look at that, and this PR is there. Just don't look at the timestamps of when this actually happened. It was last night. Cool, so that's pull requests. So in summary, use pull requests, right? That's a big piece that I'm kind of trying to hammer home here. And open those pull requests early. Don't wait until you think your feature is complete, because what if someone else beats you to the punch? Use the pull request right away, as soon as you have something to talk about. I'll often open a pull request just by changing documentation, or I don't want to just change white space and then send a pull request, but change something to talk about and then send the pull request. And then use CI to actually ensure your pull request is merged with confidence. We have many partners out there to integrate with your GitHub accounts, GitHub repositories. A lot of them are free. If you want to do a hosted solution, you could do those as well. Raise your hand if you love meetings. Great. A couple people seem to love meetings. We'll meet after this to talk about it. But I don't know too many developers who can tell me with a straight face that they would rather spend their time in a meeting than actually shipping code. What are you doing at a company if not to change the software, or make the software better, make someone's lives better? So some say that if tests are failing, you shouldn't be able to merge it into production, and there should be a gated check-in for that. We shouldn't be able to actually merge it. And that's fine. That is one way of code review. But I think it should be more than that, and I think it should involve humans, and if you can guess the C word I'm about to use, collaboration. So Jeff Atwood has done many great things, including being the co-founder of Stack Overflow. And I don't know if I'd be at my job today if it wasn't for him and being able to search things on Stack Overflow. In fact, if you use Atom as a text editor, I think there's a package that allows you to do a pop-up, type in Stack Overflow, and then copy to your clipboard from there and paste the code right in. So we're making it easier to share and collaborate our code. Secrets, I guess, and co-working there. So, but he has a point here. Peer reviews are important. And I'm not saying don't do peer reviews. When I start talking about, oh, you have your deployments and your work over here, and you have your code review over here, all I'm saying is don't split them up too much. Peer review is important. So, I gotta really stop doing that. So peer review is important, and how you do it is important. And I think you should be talking to your coworkers to actually do peer review. At GitHub, this is how we do it. There's a pull request open. I mention the appropriate team members. I bring people into the discussion, and they'll actually look at my code, and they'll use the +1 emoji and say, yep, that looks good, or that looks great. Go ahead and merge that into production, or go ahead and deploy that. And they usually help out with that as well. So here, I'm just going to open a pull request, and our developer reaches out to the GitHub teacher account. So again, if you've ever been in any of those training classes, you're maybe familiar with the teacher account here. The teachers actually commented already and just thanked us for this comment, for this method. Something really simple. And all I'm doing is talking back to that person, letting them know, hey, I've seen your comment. That looks great. I'm glad you're talking to me. I don't want to leave you hanging. So I'm just going to say this looks good. Thank you for reviewing. I'm going to go ahead and merge this now. So go ahead and merge that pull request and clean up our branches, of course, afterwards by deleting the branch. But that's really easy for me to say. We have a deep entrenched culture of don't merge without anyone reviewing your work. And if you do, we kind of talk to you and we get better at it. But people want stronger they want stronger code review. And luckily, we came out with protected branches just a short time ago. How convenient for this talk. So protected branches allow you to pick a branch within your repository and say, I don't want anyone to force push this branch. I don't want anyone to accidentally delete this branch. I don't want anyone to accidentally commit on the web side instead of sending a pull request. And I also need these tests or these required status checks to pass before I actually merge this code in. The other thing that's nice for me is maybe I don't want to use a CI service, or maybe there's not a tool out there that allows me to do more rigorous code review. Using our API, you can actually report back the commit status to fail the test. So maybe you're into using the API and you want to write something else up on your own. You could actually build a webhook on top of your repository to receive some of that data next time someone pushes code, parse through all the comments on the pull request. If you don't see any +1 emojis, attach a failing status to that commit. Then, inside protected branches, you could say, this is one of the things that is required to pass. And that sounds great, and I would have loved to build it before this, but I didn't. There is a tool an open source tool actually. There's an open source tool out there that actually allows me to do this for me. So we'll take a look at that in a bit. But first, let's actually set up protected branches. So any repository that you have admin access over, you can actually go over to the settings and then branches tab once there to enable protected branches. Now for me, I care about protecting master, and I need status checks to pass, and also that important piece right there, the include administrators, because I'm not special. I don't need to jump through. I'm not getting around this topic at all. I don't want to skip the required status checks, so we need to make sure that's added. And of course, since I've used Travis previously, that popped up there, and I can add that. So protected branches, required status checks is as easy as clicking a couple checkboxes on your project once you have CI or some other tool integrated. But what if I want sign-off, right? I kind of mentioned building that with CI, or rather building that with the API, and I don't actually want to do that. There's a really nice open source tool that I've been familiar with or seen for a while and recently integrated into a project a couple days ago and actually set up myself. Well, I kind of set it up. There's a really nice deploy to Heroku button. If you need to talk to the wonderful folks at Heroku over by the deploy stage, that would be perfect. This is one of my favorite features they've come out with in a long time. I was able to go to this project, click that button. It spins up an instance for me, free. I can set some variables and have that running for myself up in Heroku. So I don't actually have to worry about taking this open source code, running it on AWS. And again, I just kind of wanted to do a quick shout out. If this is something you're interested in looking at, it's at github.com/reviewninja/review.ninja or review.ninja just on the internet. So let's connect Review Ninja with an instance that I already have running on Heroku. So all I'm going to do is visit that URL that I have running, sign in with my account as the GitHub developer there, authorize the application. That's the same flow you'll see if you start using any of those integrations that we have out there as well. And once I'm signed in, I can select my repository that I actually want to start using code review for. And again, looking on that page there, we'll see that there's no pull request currently open. So now let's actually look at opening a pull request and make sure Review Ninja is going to be turned on for that protected statuses. So we see that pull request open. We see required on Travis, but not Review Ninja. So I'm going to go into my settings and just enable that. Just a simple checkbox once that's connected to my repository. Refreshing this page, ta-da! It says that that's now required and my merge button has been disabled. So from here on out, every single pull request under this project needs Review Ninja. And more specifically in Review Ninja, which we'll see in a moment, not only can I configure how many people need to give it a Ninja star, or for the better or worse, a +1 to merge it, there's also a number of things inside Review Ninja to mark something as needing to be reviewed, or you need to fix this problem. That will also fail on the status check, which I think is quite nice. So the PR's been open. Excuse me. The PR's been open, and the teacher can now actually go to that pull request and rather review that through Review Ninja. And they can find the pull request and comment on it, maybe find if there's any bugs. We see here that the markdown for the teacher's name is improper, so the teacher's just going to comment and say, that's not actually the link to my account. You should fix this before you merge it. In fact, I don't want the developer to accidentally merge this, so I'm going to mark this as needing to be resolved. One thing that's really nice about this connection, you may say, well, I don't want the collaboration to happen on Review Ninja. I want it to be on GitHub. This comment actually appears in line on GitHub. So if your developers just live in GitHub and your project managers or your QA team lives in Review Ninja, you can kind of, the communication and the talking between the two is across the board. So that comment goes through. And so now the student can go back and actually edit that, go into that line specifically, make that change. Review Ninja can also be enabled to send notifications out to people for when something is needing to be reviewed or resolved and fixed. So the student comes in, fixes that, goes back to Review Ninja, changes that drop-down to say, yep, this has been fixed, that's been resolved. So we see on that required status check, it doesn't say that there's any issues for Review Ninja now. And then this important part. Yes, there may be an email that goes out to the teacher, but you should talk to them. Let them know that you actually did this change. Don't just expect them to receive an email. Talk to them in GitHub to actually notify them of this change. And of course, to kind of close this little piece out, we'll see the teacher updates the student and tells them to go ahead and merge this change. We see that merge button on Review Ninja is actually green now because not only CI passing, they gave the star, and there's no resolvable comments left. And the teacher will just speak back to and collaborate back with the developer, letting them know, hey, cool, that's great. Thank you for talking to me. I'm going to message you back. Of course, I got a bug trying to hit enter there. So that looks great. And the student then could, or sorry, not the student, the developer could then go and merge the pull request. All right, so what have we learned? We got a couple things, code review being a big piece of what I just discussed. There's no one way to do code review. If you have no code review, do something. Enable a culture within your company of talking to each other on these pull requests, bringing people into the discussion, asking them to review your work, I realized two people could kind of buddy up and cheat and just say, oh, I'll always review your work, you always review mine. But if you see that happening, talk to them about it. Build a better culture. Protected branches can help ensure things. If you're maybe within a HIPAA compliance company or you work at some bank and you need some more rigorous code review for actual being audited maybe by auditors, or how's your code review process going? It needs to be stricter because we're a bank. That's possible as well. So all this coming down to the conclusion of what is the GitHub Flow. So as I mentioned in the very beginning with that picture, the GitHub Flow, I'm not going to read the whole slide, but it allows us to work and be flexible with the actual code review or pull request or workflow in general that we want to use. The reason why we teach it within GitHub Services is we want people to have a great baseline. If they want to plug something into it, they can do so. So code review and talking to your team, assuming the things that work best for you and ensuring that developers are writing good quality code. Some people will say, well, man, we're doing these code review check-ins now and people have to +1 their code. It's taking too long. Well, the quality of what they write will actually start to improve. Things will speed up a lot faster. I've seen it. I'm sure you've all seen it as well. And there used to be this philosophy that I heard other development companies or just software departments at companies say, move fast and break things. I think actually Facebook originally said that. I think I saw it in the news recently that said that's not their motto anymore. But I like that idea. So if traditionally your customers are used to something coming out every 4 to 8 weeks, well, what happens if there's a bug that was introduced when they released it? Do they have to wait 4 to 8 weeks to get a fix on that? How many people are being affected by that bug? Is that 40,000 people? Is that 1 million people? I don't know how many people have downloaded certain iOS apps, but that's a lot of people you could be affecting. Why don't you get that code out faster? Sure, maybe there's a bug introduced, and maybe now you need to do a retrospective on that code that got introduced, talk to that developer, find out how to make that better. But what if you could make that fix not take 8 weeks? What if it took 2 days? What if it just took a week? Could you cut in half the number of people that were actually affected by that bug? That'd be quite an improvement. So maybe you have something like this, where your developers' meetings are unfortunately not coming through very clearly, but I'll post these slides. You can all see this. On the left side, or current, you have a lot of calendar invites, or a lot of meetings inside your calendar. Your developer's not spending a lot of time coding. You want them spending more time coding so that they can actually ship their software, so that they can make changes and actually iterate on what they're doing. We don't want them to actually be spending time doing that. We should have that code review happening instantly, right when that pull request is open. That should be part of your development cycle. So just a call out here, one piece that we haven't actually discussed and we won't discuss is that deployment piece. There's a whole section on that happening over there. I wanted to focus on the collaboration piece of this to actually let us build that culture to then prep us to be in a perfect position to decide how we're going to deploy. And if you want to work a little bit more on deploying, you can go to the deploy section of our integrations page, pick from any number of these providers to actually pick the solution that's best for you. So some people say pull requests slow down their development flow. Well, I just want to commit to master. Why can't I do that? Because there's zero collaboration that way. You're not going to become a better developer by working by yourself. People say code review is going to take too long. I don't want to spend time doing code review. Well, you'll become a better developer as you do code review in one form or another and talk to your colleagues and work with them. And then lastly, I wanted to show this one more time to talk about these steps. Create that branch, start making some work, create a pull request, talk to your colleagues, and that collaboration piece after the pull request is there, right before that ship it squirrel, right before you decide to ship this code out to millions of people. Talk about the change. Find out what's best. Is there another set of eyes looking at this problem from a different way? Work on that. And so lastly, kind of with the GitHub Flow, using pull requests, talking to your teammates, making sure the code is well tested, well reviewed. Everyone's going to start becoming better. And as JFK, I believe, said, a rising tide lifts all ships. So raise the quality of code written at your company, work better with your coworkers, work better with the open source community, just make everyone better. Thank you. And just a quick note, if you'd like to sign up for some GitHub Services kind of one-on-one sessions or some sit-down sessions with them, right in front of the build stage, the GitHub Services team is sitting there. They have a lot of open slots to sign up with. Take a look at that, sign up, talk to them, maybe do it over lunch or whatever is most convenient for you. If you do want to have a meeting with me outside this session, I'll be around. You can reach me at, I should have added this onto the slide as well, but you can reach me just basically at Brent Beer or Brent@github.com if you want to talk to me about some changes. Thanks.